I actually like hockey, but I hate this one big part about hockey. And look, obviously the pieces are kind of similar to, I know the sport is different, but there's some similarities there to soccer. And I think some of the similarities to soccer, not as much so, are in this one thing. But last night I'm watching the Stanley Cup Finals, and it sort of dawned on me as I'm looking at my text thread and watching the game take place that I knew how it was going to end, and it was going to be I don't know if it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, or there would just be a lot of confirmation bias in it. Did anyone think that the best team won last night? That's I guess my question. Do you think the best team won? And my answer would be, well, no. That actually didn't happen. Edmonton's taken on Florida. I thought Florida was the better team. I thought Florida was the team that was dominant in overtime, and yet they lose 5-4. Edmonton ties the series at 2 apiece, and the last 3 games have all gone to overtime. But my point is more, I thought, and I don't profess to know much anything about hockey. And I'm the classic American sports fan. 95% of us didn't play hockey growing up, never played hockey on skates. Like the extent of my hockey years were the mid-'90s, 93 and 94 specifically. That's when Wayne Gretzky took the Kings to the Stanley Cup Finals, and that's when NHL 94 was out. And there was also Blades of Steel. Those are that's the extent of the deep hockey years for me. And Beyer, I'm sure you know more about hockey than I do. Sam, I read your text, and I agree with you. My issue with hockey is the randomness at times of how goals are scored in many ways takes away from who's actually the better team. And I get the larger sample size of a season is different, and ultimately the good teams. But when you're in a playoff hockey, and everyone who's a hockey fan loves to have the same narrative, nothing better than overtime hockey. But I would tell you there's lots of things better than overtime hockey. Because in other sports, again, and look, this happens in football where a team will dominate, but they got a turnover here or there, or a couple of crazy plays. Can happen some in basketball where, a team can play very well and you catch a heater, end of the game, hit a bunch of threes. It happened with the Pacers going back to the Knicks series, game 1. But by and large, if a team is dominant, is better for 95% of overtime, by and large, they're going to win. And they'll be up so much, it won't matter. Not the case with hockey. I think the 2 things I dislike about hockey is, one, hockey fan is the male version of the WNBA fan. Hey, you haven't paid attention to us for 25 years, and then when you do pay attention to us, you don't know what you're talking about. That's annoying. And then the annoying game action thing is, I just have a tough time saying that Edmonton was in any way better than Florida last night, specifically in overtime, because I thought Florida outplayed them, and then Edmonton ends up with a goal.
I thought that Edmonton played, they were down 3-0, so they obviously played well enough in the second period to even it up at 3, and then they get the goal to go ahead. I think Florida played better at the end and then into overtime, that I felt that they had all of the momentum. But I think that is part of it as well, is as someone who isn't a huge hockey fan and also can get annoyed by a hockey fan, what I loved about this overtime and other overtimes, not only do Iowa Sam and I now have a vested interest in Edmonton winning, But there's also this balance. There's this balance of, do you play it safe? Do you go for it? What do you do? And if you go for it, does that leave you weak on the back end if there's something that leaks out? And that's what you got last night. Florida actually had a great chance in overtime to win it and was unable to cash in. I felt that they put more pressure on Edmonton. Edmonton really didn't have any good chances. And ultimately, their goal comes on a bit of a fluke play. But it's also no difference, and this may not change your opinion, Doug, but we've had hot goalies in the past, right? Where teams are they've got the guy in net, and there's nothing that you can do about it. And I think that when you have just the balance, specifically in overtime, of sudden death, winner take all, where every single possession, every almost pass of the puck could alter the game, I find that very exciting.
Sam, where are you on going off of your comments that you agree with me? But again, Dan made bigger comments, some having to do with what I'm talking about, but obviously more thorough in terms of his analysis.
What's your question? Just like,
well, again, when you walk away from last night, do you think the better team won? Do you think that was it exciting to the point where it's bringing you back?
Bringing me back to watch the next game?
5. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think this has been I don't know how to size up these teams. Like, I know Florida is technically better because they bested the Oilers last year and they were the favorite coming into this Stanley Cup. All I know is that, 3 of the 4 games have been overtime. They've been pretty exciting. You've got teams winning on the road. This is a good product. I'm not a hockey guy. I don't know how to size these teams up, but I know that the Oilers have a couple huge stars in Draisaitl and McDavid, and the Panthers have Marchand.
Why did you love last night? Why did you like last night's game?
That's a great question.
I feel like the Edmonton Oilers kind of have this Pacers kind of energy. Like, I'm just pulling for them, and I know that they're not the better team than Oklahoma City, but they find ways to at least tie up the series or take a lead like the Pacers did in the series, and that's just got me hooked.
Okay.
It's been a good final, a good product.
All right, Jay Stu. Now again, Jay Stu, I don't know where you come in on hockey. I mean, you and I have talked about it some, but for people who don't know, Jay Stu was a huge part of the Jim Rome show for a long time. How many years you with Rome?
14 years.
14. It's actually the number I thought, but I said it and I was like, is that the right number?
Andy Reid. Andy, just for listeners who want to reference, my time with Jim Rome mirrored Andy Reid's time with the Eagles.
Wow. Okay.
So anytime you want to think about, man, how long was Jay Stu with Jim Rome? Think Andy Reid with the Eagles.
That's actually very helpful.
I bring it up because, and I don't know if Rome's affinity for hockey was real or just radio creation, but I will say that you guys talk more hockey than anybody. I mean, our thought always when I was at ESPN Radio was Rome's talking hockey, everybody else wins, because the second you talk about hockey, people go, click, don't care, right? And you guys talk hockey some like regular season, early playoffs, not just Stanley Cup finals. Have you been as engaged and locked in on hockey even during those 14 years?
No, never.
Okay.
It's a sport that has never once resonated with me. I have good friends that are hockey fans, good friends that are Kings fans, and they've always said, man, you got to go. Once you go, you'll be hooked. And
yeah.
I've gone.
It's like NASCAR guy says the same thing, by the way.
Yeah. And
NASCAR guy always goes, you got to go.
Yeah.
Got to go.
Yeah, neither sport got me when I went. And the premise of your question, did the better team win? That assumes two things. That assumes I watched, and that assumes that even if I did watch, I would have the sophistication to know which team is better. To your point, one of the things that turns me off about the sport is how random it is. Especially, this is the part that really gets me. When there's the puck is in front of the goalie and the goalie hasn't secured it and everyone is just chopping the hell out of the ice to hit the puck and then it goes off the goalie's leg and into the goal, I see zero skill in that. So it's hard for me to get with stuff like that.
I completely agree with you on that. And I normally agree with you on the level of sophistication. Like, it's like when I watch soccer highlights or I watch halftime of soccer, the analysis is so weird because they talk about spirit and energy. Like, just tell me who's playing better and why. Try to explain to me why some team's playing better. I don't know. Last night I was watching, and I did really agree with Sam. I just remember looking down at my phone, and Sam had just texted us saying, like, they're dominating in overtime. And I was like, yeah, I mean, they're not dominating in the score, obviously, but it does feel like Edmonton is just staving off losing this thing, play after play, just surviving. So I like the sophistication as well, Jay Stu, and I'm with you. It's never really resonated. I always thought it was cool. I'm like, yeah, it's cool sport. It's really hard. It's just, I don't know anything about it, you know?
There is something, and it's a reason why we say there's nothing better than playoff hockey, because you don't get this sense of urgency in the regular season. And for as much as we may love the 5 minutes that they play 3-on-3, still a team, ends up winning, and maybe they don't, and then you just move on to the next game. Maybe it's exciting for those 5 minutes, but there is something about this urgency of the sudden death nature of it, where even the goal last night ended up being, a situation where it was 2 passes earlier that probably set up the goal. And I know that's not for everybody, but that's to my point of why every possession or what you do with the puck is another opportunity to win or lose the game. You may look at it from a perspective of, well, there are no goals, just like game 2 when they didn't score any goals in the first overtime. But for 20 minutes, you have a back and forth of this game could be decided on this sort of play. Honestly, as someone who was cheering for Edmonton last night, the first 5 minutes of overtime felt like 20 minutes of game time because it didn't seem like they were in control. And you're just like, my goodness, when are you going to be able to do something here? It felt like Florida had all the chances and all the momentum. And I remember looking up at the clock and I'm like, wow, there's only like 5:20 that's gone by in this overtime session. Ultimately, from what you guys are saying, how the game ends isn't indicative of how the end of the game was played, and that's what's frustrating to you. But I just look at it as like, if you have a dog in the fight, every single possession, every single pass that you have could set up that goal, and that's what makes it interesting. It's made it interesting to me with a dog in this fight.
It's a fair way to look at it. It's a fair perspective. But yes, that's ultimately I do sometimes become result oriented. Like I don't understand, and it hurts my desire to view the sport because I just don't understand, or maybe I do understand. Maybe that's hockey. It's like we talk about that's baseball.
Yeah. Here's the funny thing as well, just quickly, like as we're having this conversation, we're talking, and I'm not picking on Sam. I think that this is a legitimate thing that goes on. We're looking at Florida as being the haves and Edmonton being the have-nots for what's not happened in hockey.
Yeah.
Edmonton has home ice. They both were 3 seeds in their conferences. Edmonton actually finished with more points this season. They have the best player in all of hockey. So there are all these seemingly inherent advantages towards Edmonton that we really don't pay attention to because we look at the Panthers as the defending Stanley Cup champs, and we look at Edmonton as trying to break through with Canada.
And the Canadian streak.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome. I actually think it's awesome that it's a bit of the opposite. So like we try to compare it to the NBA, that's not necessarily the case. And I'm talking as a guy that didn't care about last year's Stanley Cup, even with Edmonton in it. There is something about this year's that just brought me in, and I have no idea what it was, and I don't know if it's the NBA and having the playoffs be how they played out. But my buddy back in Wisconsin that I visited a couple of weeks ago, who I never thought would ever watch a hockey game, we're sitting at Buffalo Wild Wings eating, and he goes, it's been really good. Because I've watched it more than the NBA. And I found that very interesting.